For more than 2 decades, Sultan Mehmed II was in a near constant state of war. His armies were always on the march, from Hungary all the way to Anatolia, pushing the Ottoman Empire's borders out in every direction. But here's the thing. His real, ultimate ambition, the grand prize he was after his whole reign, wasn't in any of those places. No, it was across the sea, right in the heart of the Catholic world, Italy. Mohammed even had a name for this crazy ambition, the Red Apple. That was his code for Rome itself. See, he'd already conquered the first Rome, Constantinople. That was the old Red Apple. So in his mind, it was his destiny to capture the second one. And for him, the time was right. The apple was ready to be plucked. So you gotta ask, right? How could he possibly launch a full-blown invasion of Italy when his empire was practically surrounded by hostile powers, locked in what felt like endless wars? Well, the simple answer is he couldn't. Before Mehmed could even think about reaching for his red apple, he first had to clear the board. And he was going to do it through a series of absolutely brilliant and brutal campaigns to make his frontiers rock solid. First up, he turned his attention north to the Black Sea. And his goal, whoa, it was audacious. He wanted to transform the entire sea into a secure Ottoman lake. And that meant he had to deal with everyone, the powerful Genoese trading colonies, a bunch of local principalities, and even the leftovers of the Mongol Empire. Now, to really get what's happening here, you have to understand the power vacuum that this slide shows. For centuries, the Golden Horde, a successor to the massive Mongol Empire, had run this whole region. But after a completely devastating invasion by Timur, it just shattered. It broke apart, leaving behind a bunch of weaker states, including the brand new Crimean Khanate. And let me tell you, both the Crimeans and Mehmed saw a huge opportunity. And that opportunity? It arrived in the form of a civil war. This is just a perfect example of how Mehmed played the game. The ruler of Crimea died, and his two sons immediately started fighting over the throne. One of them actually asked for Ottoman help. At the very same time, the local Tatar elites, who were sick and tired of Genoese merchants bossing them around, also invited the Sultan to step in. For Mehmed, it was the perfect excuse to flex his muscles and assert his power. So Mehmed sent his best general, Gidik Ahmed Pasha, to show off the raw power of his military machine. And the results were, well, they were swift and dramatic. The incredibly wealthy Genoese port of Kaffa got pounded by Ottoman cannons and fell in just 4 days. 4 days! But then you have Theodoro. And what a contrast. This tiny Greek state, literally the very last piece of the old Eastern Roman Empire, held out for over 3 months. It was a desperate, heroic last stand before they were finally, inevitably overwhelmed. So here's the bottom line. In one single masterful campaign, Mehmed got everything he wanted. His guy was put on the Crimean throne, making it an Ottoman vassal state. Check. The Genoese were completely kicked out of the Black Sea. Check. Theodora was gone. Check. Even neighboring Moldavia was bullied into paying tribute. Just like that, the northern flank was secure. All right, let's shift gears and move west, because this is where the strategy really starts to come together. With the north totally locked down, Muhammad could finally turn his full attention to ending the 2 wars that had been bleeding his empire dry for decades. The big naval war against Venice, and that stubborn, bloody rebellion in Albania. Now, to really turn up the heat on Venice, Ottoman raiders called the Akinji, these are a kind of irregular light cavalry, pushed deeper into Christian Europe than ever before. They were burning and pillaging Venetian lands in Friuli so close to the capital city that people claimed you could see the glow of the fires from the top of the bell tower of St. Mark's Basilica in Venice itself. Can you imagine the terror? The psychological impact across Europe was just immense. The final blow, though, landed in Albania. After decades of fighting, the revolt was finally collapsing. The capital, Cluj, was starved into surrender right when Mehmed showed up with his main army. Then, the Sultan marched on the massive Venetian fortress of Shkodra. With their last real stronghold under siege and their trade routes getting wrecked, Venice was cornered. They had no choice but to ask for peace. And that peace? Oh, it came at a staggering cost. It wasn't just about giving up land. Venice was forced to pay a massive fine of 150,000 golden ducats. On top of that, they had to pay a new yearly tribute just for the privilege of trading in Ottoman territory. It was a crippling financial blow, and it was designed specifically to keep them on the sidelines for a long, long time. Let's break this down, because this treaty was a total masterstroke for Mehmed. For Venice, it was a disaster. they lost the key fortress of Shkodra, which sealed Ottoman control over Albania. They lost the vital island of Lemnos, which gave the Sultan a much stronger naval position in the Aegean Sea. By giving all this up, Venice was basically taken off the board as a major obstacle. The western flank was now pacified, but there was still one piece left on the board that just refused to be cleared: the Kingdom of Hungary. They were a foe Mehmed had never really been able to beat. In 1479, he sent a big raiding army into Hungarian-held Transylvania, where it was about to meet a very determined coalition on a field that would go down in history with the name Breadfield. All right, so let's look at the matchup here. On one side, you've got about 20,000 Ottoman Akonji and their Wallachian allies. On the other, a bigger and much more diverse army of up to 30,000 Hungarians, Romanians, Saxons, and Serbs, led by a couple of legendary commanders, Stephen Bathory and Paul Canisi. The battle itself was just a chaotic 5-hour slugfest, and at first it looked really bad for the Hungarians. Their first charge failed, and their commander, Bathory, was knocked off his horse and badly wounded, which almost broke his army. But then, in a desperate counterattack, the tide turned. The Ottoman commander in the center, Isa Bey, was killed. Panic ripped through the Ottoman ranks, and the other Hungarian commander, the legendary Paul Canisi, seized the moment. He led a final, crushing charge that just shattered the Ottoman lines. And I mean, just look at these numbers. They tell the whole story. The Ottomans suffered devastating losses. We're talking over 10,000 men. That's nearly half their army. It was a massive defeat, and it was celebrated all across Europe. It was one of those rare moments when the seemingly unstoppable Ottoman war machine was actually stopped dead in its tracks. So did this huge defeat derail Mehmed's grand plan? Not even close. And this is so important to understand. While Breadvolt was a huge victory for Hungary, it was a defeat for a regional raiding army. It wasn't the Sultan's main imperial force. It didn't change the grand strategic picture one bit. And this right here is the key takeaway. Just look at the chessboard. To the north, the Black Sea is his lake. To the west, his longest, most draining wars are finally over, and his biggest rival, Venice, is licking its wounds on the sidelines. Mehmed had systematically and ruthlessly eliminated every single major threat on his flanks. He had, for all intents and purposes, cleared the board. Which brings us right to our final lingering question. With his massive empire finally secure, and all his enemies either defeated or neutralized, the path to Italy was wide open. The stage was set for the final act of his life's ambition. So could anyone, or anything, stop the conqueror from finally plucking his red apple?